Chapter 1. The Cornerstone at the Breakfast Table. The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen curtains, catching the dust motes dancing over the breakfast nook. Leanne stood at the counter, her hands already marked by the faint, characteristic smudge of resin dust. She glanced out the kitchen window toward the backyard, where the separate structure stood. It had once been Ricardo's barbecue house, the site of many family gatherings, but it was now her sanctuary, a specialized workshop where she spent her days turning raw wood and liquid resin into personalized gifts. But for now, the workbench was quiet. "It's almost time," Leanne said softly, setting a plate of toast down. Ricardo, still dressed for his day at the office, pulled out a chair. Beside him, their daughter Sarah was bustling with the distracted energy of a student preparing for a busy day. As they settled in, the hum of the morning routine slowed. Leanne opened the small, worn Bible that lived on the kitchen table. Today, July 3rd, marked the feast of St. Thomas. As she read the passage from Ephesians about being built together into a holy temple with Christ as the cornerstone, she looked at her husband and daughter. "We talk about my work in the shop a lot," Leanne said, her thumb tracing the edge of the page. "I spend so much time making sure the resin cures perfectly, that the wood is sanded smooth, that everything is structural. But today's reading reminds me that this family, our faith, is the real structure. We aren't strangers here. We are the household of God." Ricardo nodded, his gaze steady. He thought of the chaos of his upcoming workday, the deadlines and the demands. "It's easy to feel like we're just building our own lives, our own careers," he replied. "But St. Thomas reminds us that it's about his foundation. If we aren't built on that, the rest of it is just decoration." Sarah listened, the weight of the morning's tests and social pressures momentarily pushed into the background. For a brief moment, the kitchen wasn't just a place to eat before rushing out the door. It was the bedrock upon which the rest of their day would be constructed. Chapter 2. The Doubt and the Light. After the prayer, the household shifted into its kinetic rhythm. Sarah gathered her backpack, the door clicking shut behind her as she headed off to school. Ricardo kissed Leanne goodbye, his brief smile conveying a quiet strength, before he walked out the side door and departed for work. Alone now, Leanne stepped out into the crisp morning air and walked across the yard to the workshop. As she unlatched the door to what used to be the barbecue house, the familiar, comforting scent of pine and the chemical tang of curing resin greeted her. She picked up a piece of polished walnut, feeling its grain beneath her fingertips. She was working on a commission, a memorial piece that required absolute precision. Her mind drifted back to the gospel reading from their breakfast devotion. She thought of Thomas. It was strange, she mused, how often people painted him as the villain of the story for his doubt. But as she carefully poured the resin into the mold, she saw him differently. Thomas hadn't wanted to settle for stories. He had wanted an encounter. "My Lord and my God." "Lord," she whispered, the word echoing in the quiet shop. "Let me encounter you in the work today." Not just in the finished product, but in the crafting. She focused on the swirling patterns of blue and gold she was blending into the resin. She thought of her family, Ricardo navigating the stress of his office, and Sarah dealing with the complexities of her school day. She prayed for them, pouring her intentions into the work as if the resin itself could carry her petitions. She realized then that her personalized gift building wasn't just a trade. It was a witness. Every piece that left this converted building would go into someone else's home, a small, tangible reminder of beauty and care, just as the apostles had been tasked with going out into the world. This small space in her backyard was her own launching pad. The sun climbed higher, the light deepening in the shop, and Leanne began to work, her hands steady, her heart anchored to the cornerstone they had discussed that morning. Chapter 3. The Call from the Peeps. The morning sun was already beginning to heat the roof of the workshop. A reminder of the many summer afternoons the building had spent as a hub for barbecue smoke and laughter. Now it was a hub for creation. Leanne was just about to set a timer for a deep pour mold when her phone buzzed on the workbench, startling the silence. The screen read, "Andrea, my peeps." Leanne wiped her hands on her apron and tapped the speakerphone. "Andrea, I was just thinking about you." "Hey, Leanne. I know you're probably deep into a project." Andrea's voice came through, warm but carrying a thread of hesitation. "But I've been struggling a bit this morning. I'm having one of those days where everything feels, I don't know, intangible. I keep trying to find a sense of direction with my current project, and I feel like I'm grasping at smoke." Leanne leaned against the workbench, looking at the wood and resin waiting to be transformed. The conversation felt serendipitous. "You know, it's funny you called," Leanne said, her voice gentle. "We were just talking about St. Thomas at breakfast this morning, the apostle who had to touch the wounds to believe." The doubter," Andrea sighed. "Maybe," Leanne countered, smiling as she picked up a sanding block. "But I think he was just someone who refused to believe in a second-hand faith. He wanted his own encounter. If you're feeling like you're grasping at smoke, Andrea, maybe that's just a sign that you aren't looking for something temporary. You're looking for the cornerstone." There was a pause on the other end, the kind of silence that held weight. "I think I've been trying to build my house on my own terms," Andrea admitted quietly, "and it feels like the foundation is shifting." "We're all just laborers in the harvest, Andrea," Leanne said, echoing the sentiment they often shared in their group. "If the foundation is him, the structure holds. Don't worry about the blueprint being perfect right now. Just focus on the next step. Let him be the one who makes it solid." They talked a little longer, the conversation grounding them both. As they hung up, the workshop felt different. The isolation of the shed wasn't a barrier. It was a bridge. Through the phone, she had been able to reach out and share that morning's grace. She realized that her role as a builder didn't stop with the resin and wood. It extended to the people in her life. She was part of a larger living structure, just as the epistle had promised. Chapter 4. The Halls of Uncertainty. Sarah pushed through the heavy glass doors of the high school, the familiar roar of 1,000 morning conversations washing over her. It was a stark contrast to the quiet, centered atmosphere of the kitchen breakfast nook just an hour before. Here, the Cornerstone felt like a distant concept, buried beneath the pressure of upcoming exams, the clatter of lockers, and the shifting social dynamics of her peer group. As she navigated the crowded hallway toward her first period class, Sarah felt a pang of the same anxiety Andrea had described to her mother on the phone. Everything here felt fleeting, friendships that drifted like sand, trends that changed by the week, and the constant, gnawing need to prove herself. She caught sight of a group of friends near the water fountain, their laughter high and sharp. For a fleeting second, Sarah felt like an outsider looking in. She remembered the gospel reading her mother had shared. Thomas standing on the periphery, needing to see, needing to know if the miracle was real. She realized then that she was doing the same thing. She was walking through these halls looking for proof that her faith actually meant something in a place that seemed to prioritize everything else. She reached her locker and spun the dial, the mechanical click, 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 a grounding rhythm. As she pulled out her history textbook, a girl named Mia, whom Sarah hadn't spoken to in months, stopped beside her. "Hey, Sarah. You look, I don't know, calm?" Mia said, leaning against the lockers. "Usually everyone looks like they're running a race this early." Sarah hesitated, then smiled. "I think I just started my day differently today," she said, choosing her words carefully. "I'm trying to remember that I don't have to carry the whole weight of the day by myself." It was a small profession of faith, not quite the "my Lord and my God" of Thomas, but a start. As the bell rang, signaling the start of the day, Sarah felt a tiny internal shift. The hallways were still loud, the pressures were still there, but she wasn't just a student drifting through the crowd. She was part of something solid, a building block in a much larger story. She turned toward her classroom, her step a little lighter, carrying the quiet peace of the breakfast table into the noise of the school. Chapter 5. The Weight of the Office. Ricardo's office was a landscape of glass walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and the hum of printers. Unlike the workshop in the backyard, where silence was a tool for creation, here, silence was something to be filled immediately, with emails, calls, and urgent demands. As he sat at his desk, the screen already populated with a dozen urgent notifications. Ricardo felt the familiar tightening in his chest. He was a man who prided himself on being a provider, on maintaining the structure of their household. But today, the weight felt heavier than usual. The gospel reading from that morning, the image of Jesus seeing the crowds as sheep without a shepherd, kept surfacing in his mind. He looked around the office. His colleagues were efficient, driven, and seemingly untroubled, but he sensed a quiet desperation beneath the professionalism. Everyone was building, but what was the foundation? His phone buzzed. It was a message from his supervisor regarding a project that was falling behind schedule. He looked at the stark demand on the screen, then at the small, resin-encased photograph of Leanne and Sarah sitting on the corner of his desk. If the foundation is him, the structure holds, he recalled Leanne saying earlier that morning. He took a slow breath, centering himself. He couldn't stop the flow of work, nor could he magically fix the office culture, but he could change his own posture within it. Instead of reacting with the same frantic energy as his peers, he chose to pause. He spent a moment in silent prayer, asking for the grace to be a laborer rather than just a worker, someone who could offer compassion even in the midst of corporate deadlines. When he finally started typing his reply to his supervisor, he found that his tone had shifted. He was firm, professional, and clear, but the sharp edge of anxiety was gone. He was no longer just running a race. He was doing his part in the harvest. The pressure of the day remained, but for the first time in a long while, Ricardo didn't feel like he was doing it all on his own strength. He was, in his own quiet way, building on the cornerstone. Chapter 6. The Intersection of Faith and Transit. By mid-afternoon, the sun was at its peak, casting long, sharp shadows across the driveway as Leanne loaded her SUV. She had several errands to run, dropping off a custom order at the post office and picking up supplies for a new batch of resin, pigments. As she pulled out of the driveway and merged onto the main road, her phone's Bluetooth crackled to life. It was Malika. "Leanne, I've been meaning to catch you." Malika's voice came through, energetic and characteristically unfiltered. "I know it's the Feast of St. Thomas today, and I've been sitting here processing that reading all day. Honestly, I have a totally different take on it than everyone else." Leanne smiled, navigating the light traffic. "I'm all ears, Malika. What's your take?" "Everyone focuses on Thomas needing to touch the wounds," Malika said, her tone thoughtful. "But I keep thinking about the fact that he was absent the first time Jesus appeared. He missed the moment. He was out doing his own thing, disconnected from the group. I wonder how many times I miss the resurrection moment in my own life because I'm too busy being scattered, doing my own errands, worrying about my own schedule." Leanne gripped the steering wheel, struck by the honesty of the observation. She had been so focused on the value of the work and the solidity of the foundation, but Malika was highlighting the danger of being disconnected from the community. "That's a tough perspective," Leanne admitted, stopping at a red light. "But it makes sense. If we're not with the peeps, so to speak, if we're not gathered where the grace is happening, we're bound to be in doubt." "Exactly," Malika continued. "I've been feeling so fragmented lately. I think I've been trying to build my own little kingdom, instead of waiting for the Lord to show me where He's already working. It's like we're all trying to be the architects, but we're just supposed to be the materials." As Leanne pulled into the grocery store parking lot, the conversation took on a deeper resonance. The noise of the city, the heat of the day, and the mundane nature of her errands felt transformed. She wasn't just running chores. She was participating in a life that required her to be present in the room with her faith, just as the disciples were gathered together when Jesus appeared. "I think I needed to hear that today, Malika," Leanne said softly as she parked. It's not just about the foundation. It's about making sure we're actually in the building when he shows up. Amen to that. Malika laughed, the tension in her voice lifting. All right, get your errands done. But remember, don't miss the moment. Leanne hung up, sitting in the quiet of her car for a second before stepping out into the heat. She felt less like an isolated worker and more like a part of a larger living structure. Her errands were no longer just tasks. They were part of her walk. Chapter 7. The Architecture of Presence. While Leanne navigated the aisles of the grocery store, Malika was miles away, sitting in her home office. The silence in her room felt different now, less like the empty space of a person working alone, and more like the expectant quiet of a room waiting to be filled. Malika's realization wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a mirror held up to her week. She looked at her calendar, a dense grid of appointments, networking events, and solitary projects. She had been treating her life like a construction project she was personally overseeing, managing every brick and beam with a sense of frantic autonomy. If I'm not in the room when he shows up, I'm building nothing, she thought. She stood up and walked to her window. She saw her neighbor struggling to carry a heavy delivery into the house. In her old rhythm, the one focused on her own kingdom, she would have stayed at her desk, calculating the minutes she would lose if she interrupted her flow. But the weight of her conversation with Leanne was still echoing in her mind. She walked out the front door, the July heat hitting her instantly. "Need a hand with that?" she called out. Her neighbor looked up, surprised and visibly relieved. "Oh, thank you, Malika. I thought I'd be at this all afternoon." As they worked together, the simple physical act of helping seemed to dissolve the fragmented feeling that had been plaguing her. It was a small resurrection moment, a sudden infusion of grace in a mundane Tuesday. By choosing to be present for someone else, Malika found she was no longer isolated in her own headspace. She was no longer just the architect of her own busy schedule. She was a participant in something communal and living. Back inside, she didn't rush to reclaim her productivity. Instead, she took 10 minutes to sit in the quiet, not to plan, but to listen. She realized that Thomas's doubt hadn't been a lack of faith, but a longing for the truth of the person of Jesus. She had been so busy building the structure of her life that she had forgotten to look for the guest. Her laptop screen, filled with unfinished tasks, seemed less demanding now. They were just tasks, not the definition of her worth. She was part of a foundation that held firm regardless of her checklist. As the afternoon light began to shift toward evening, Malika felt a profound sense of realignment. She wasn't just working. She was existing within the household of God, ready to be wherever he chose to appear next. Chapter 8. The Scent of Home and Heart by the time the afternoon shadows stretched long across the backyard. The workshop, the old barbecue house, was quiet. Leanne had finished the final pour on the custom resin pieces, the deep, rich colors settling perfectly into their wooden molds. She wiped the last trace of residue from her hands, feeling the familiar, grounding satisfaction of a job well done. Walking back toward the main house, the air felt different, thick with the promise of evening. She stepped into the kitchen, a space where the atmosphere was entirely different from her studio. Here, the hum of the day was replaced by the comforting rhythmic sounds of preparation. She turned on the stove, the flame licking the bottom of her heavy pot. She began to sauté the aromatics, onions, scallions, thyme, and the Scotch bonnet pepper that brought a sharp, bright heat to the air. She was making her famous curry goat, a slow-cooked labor of love that required patience, much like the curing of her resin. As the spices bloomed in the oil, the kitchen became a sanctuary, filled with the warmth of a true Jamaican home. Sarah arrived shortly after, dropping her heavy backpack by the door with a weary sigh. She didn't head for the television or her room. Instead, she pulled her chair up to the kitchen table, spreading out her textbooks and notebooks right in the heart of the activity. "How was the Cornerstone today?" Leanne asked, stirring the pot. The rich golden scent of the curry filled the room, wrapping around them. Sarah looked up, her expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "It was okay, different. I felt like I was actually paying attention, you know? Like I wasn't just drifting." She began to talk, telling Leanne about the fusion of her school frustrations and the quiet, strange peace she had carried with her since the morning. She spoke about her friends, the pressure to conform, and how the realization of being part of a household made the hallways feel just a little less imposing. Leanne listened, nodding as she added the coconut milk to the goat, the liquid swirling into a creamy, vibrant gold. The conversation flowed as naturally as the cooking. They were building something in that kitchen, not just a meal, but a space of belonging. "You know, Sarah," Leanne said, leaning against the counter, "sometimes we think faith is this big, loud thing. But today reminded me that it's mostly found in the prep work, in the small decisions to be present. Like this curry, it's not just the ingredients, it's the time you put in, the way you let it all meld together." Sarah smiled, her pen hovering over her page. The kitchen was warm, safe, and filled with the essence of home. They were waiting for the final piece of their day, Ricardo, to complete the circle. Chapter 9. The Final Ingredient. The sound of Ricardo's key in the lock was a signal. The heavy aroma of the curry goat had reached its peak, and the table was already set. But the house felt incomplete until he stepped inside. He walked in, loosening his tie, his shoulders finally dropping from the tension they had held since morning. He didn't just offer the usual hello. He paused, looking at his family, Leanne, with her hands still carrying the subtle scent of workshop dust and kitchen spices, and Sarah, who looked up from her books with an expectant smile. "The house feels solid today," Ricardo said, his voice dropping into the familiar warmth of their evening rhythm. He pulled up a chair between them, and as Leanne plated the steaming, golden curry and fluffy rice, he began to tell his story. He talked about the office, the relentless pace, and then the moment of grace. "I had one of my younger associates, Marcus, practically vibrating with stress today," Ricardo recounted. "He was convinced that if we didn't hit our targets by Friday, the whole project was going to implode. He was full of doubt, questioning everything, questioning his own competence. He was honestly the classic doubting Thomas of the department." Leanne and Sarah leaned in, their forks pausing midair. "I thought about our morning," Ricardo continued, nodding toward the kitchen Bible still resting on the counter. "I didn't give him a lecture. I just brought him a coffee and sat with him for 5 minutes. I told him, 'Marcus, you're looking for evidence that the work is going to succeed, but maybe just focus on doing the work right in front of you. Build it one brick at a time and stop worrying about the whole wall falling down.' Did it help?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide. "It calmed him down," Ricardo said with a quiet smile. "He just needed someone to be present with him in the doubt. He needed to know he wasn't alone in the middle of the project. It hit me then. That's exactly what Jesus did for Thomas. He didn't scold him for his lack of sight. He just entered into the space where Thomas was and made himself known." Leanne felt a surge of pride, her heart full as she looked at her husband. They had all spent the day in such different worlds, the workshop, the high school, the office, but they had all been doing the same work, the work of the harvest. "We were all building today," Leanne said, her voice soft over the clatter of plates. "Exactly," Ricardo agreed, bowing his head as they joined hands. "We went out as laborers, we faced our own doubts, and we tried to stay connected. Now we're back at the table." As they began their meal, the curry warming their souls and the shared stories knitting their hearts together, the house truly felt like a temple. They were no longer just a family living in a house. They were the household of God, built upon the foundation they had affirmed that morning, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Chapter 10. Sweetness and Reflection. The main meal had been a time for grounding, but the true sweetness of the evening arrived with dessert. Leanne had prepared a creamy, chilled cheesecake, its richness a perfect contrast to the spice of the curry. As she sliced it, the kitchen air cooled, the intense heat of the stove fading into the quiet serenity of the night. Leanne took a seat, the fork clicking softly against the plate. She looked at Ricardo and Sarah, her heart full from the day's work, both in the shop and in the spirit. "You know," Leanne began, catching their attention, "my work today wasn't just in the resin, it was in the connections. I had a long talk with Andrea, and then later with Malika while I was out." Sarah looked up, a piece of cheesecake forgotten on her spoon. "Andrea from the Peeps group?" "Yes," Leanne nodded. "And it's funny. Both of them were struggling with the exact same doubt I was feeling in the shop. The temptation to try and be the architect of everything, to be in control, and then the crushing feeling of doubt when the results aren't immediately clear." Ricardo listened intently, his hand resting on the table. They were feeling the Thomas frustration too? "Exactly," Leanne said. She shared with them Malika's breakthrough, the realization that they weren't just meant to be doing things, but that they were meant to be present in the room where grace happens. She explained how Malika had stopped to help her neighbor, shifting from an architect of a busy schedule to a participant in a living community. She called it an architecture of presence, Leanne mused. "It made me realize that my workshop, as isolated as it is in the backyard, isn't a fortress. It's a place for me to prepare so I can be ready when people like Andrea or Malika need to connect." Sarah looked thoughtful. "It's kind of like what I felt at school," she added quietly. "When I stopped running and actually talked to Mia, it wasn't about doing a conversation. It was just about being there. I think that's what Thomas was missing, isn't it? He just needed to be with Jesus. He didn't need a lecture. He just needed to be in the same space." Ricardo smiled, the lines around his eyes softening. "It sounds like we all had a version of that same encounter today. Whether it was the office, the school, or the shop, we were all being called out of our own doubt and into the presence of others." The house was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle clinking of dessert spoons. The cheesecake was delicious, but the conversation was what truly satisfied. In this Jamaican home under the quiet night sky, they were realizing that the harvest wasn't a future goal. It was the very lives they were living right now, together. "So," Ricardo said, reaching out to squeeze Leanne's hand, then Sarah's. "We've laid the foundation today. We've acknowledged the cornerstone. We've even managed to stay in the room. And we've fed the body and the soul," Leanne added with a wink. They finished their dessert in comfortable silence, the weight of the day's struggles replaced by a profound, shared peace. They were ready for whatever tomorrow might bring, not because they had everything figured out, but because they knew they were building it together. Chapter 11. The Evening Blessing. The kitchen had quieted. The dishes were cleared, and the soft yellow glow of the hallway lamp guided Sarah toward her room. The bustle of the school day, the weight of her assignments, and the complex social currents of her teenage years felt distant now, replaced by the profound sense of security that only comes from knowing you are part of a whole. Leanne and Ricardo walked with her, their presence a steady, comforting weight. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, the day's exhaustion finally settling into her bones, but her mind was clear. "I felt like I was searching for proof all day," Sarah admitted, looking up at her parents. "But tonight at the table, it felt like the proof was just being with you guys, being with God." Ricardo sat beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "That's the beauty of the faith journey, Sarah. It's not about finding a magic answer. It's about recognizing who is at the table with you. You don't have to carry the uncertainty alone." Leanne smoothed the quilt, her expression tender. "We aren't just living a day-to-day life, Sarah. We're being built, stone by stone. Just like we talked about this morning with St. Thomas. You are a vital part of this temple." Sarah nodded, a small, sleepy smile touching her lips. "I'm ready for tomorrow." "Let's pray," Leanne said softly. They moved together, sliding off the bed to kneel on the soft rug beside it. In the quiet of the room, the world outside, the office pressures, the workshop demands, the busy classrooms, fell away. "Lord," Ricardo began, his voice deep and steady, "thank you for the harvest. Thank you for the people you placed in our path today. We lift up Marcus, that he may find peace in his work. We pray for Andrea and Malika, that they continue to find grace in their own architecture of presence." Leanne took up the prayer, her voice weaving through the room like incense. "Lord, we thank you for our family. Help us to remain your laborers, building not for ourselves but for your kingdom. Protect our hearts from doubt, and help us to always be the kind of people who welcome others into your house." Sarah whispered her own prayer, her voice trembling slightly with sincerity. "And thank you for the people listening to our journey, Lord. Help them find their own cornerstone. Let them know they are never alone in their struggles, and that you are always standing right there in the middle of their day." They stayed there for a long moment, the silence holy and full. They weren't just a family praying. They were members of a much larger household, resting in the care of the Master of the Harvest. As they rose, the light was dimmed, and the house settled into a peaceful, expectant hush. The work of the day was done, the foundation was secure, and they drifted off to sleep, ready to wake and build again under the grace of a new dawn.
Thank you so much for joining us on our Catholic faith journey today. We pray that this reflection has touched your heart and brought you closer to God. If this story blessed you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need this message today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and become part of our growing faith family. You can also follow us on our other social media platforms: Facebook, Our Catholic Faith Journey, Instagram, Our Catholic Faith Journey, YouTube, ILC Demald, TikTok, Handcrafted by Leanne for more inspiring Catholic stories, daily reflections, heartfelt prayers, and faith-filled content. Be sure to check out our channel and explore our full collection of videos. Until next time, remember, keep the faith, trust God's plan, live the gospel, and never forget. God is not finished with your story yet. May God bless you, keep you safe, and fill your heart with His peace. We'll see you again soon on our Catholic faith journey.